All right, let's just jump right in with a fun little scenario. So imagine three friends are sitting around a table at their favorite local kopitiam, right? They each have exactly $100,000 to invest. Friend number one slides over this stack of glossy, heavy condo brochures. Friend number two is tapping away on their phone, showing off some fast-moving stock trading app. And the third friend? They just pull up a simple REIT screener. So we've got three friends, three completely different paths, all starting with the exact same capital. If we hit fast forward 10 years into the future, who actually made the smartest call? Well, in today's explainer, we're going to put these three heavyweights in the ring, score the showdown, and figure out exactly who wins.
Now, to set this up fairly, we kind of have to agree on the rules of the game. For decades, investors have argued endlessly over property versus stocks versus real estate investment trusts, or REITs. But honestly, most of those arguments are just based on gut feelings, random anecdotes, or, just vibes. We're not doing that today. We are going to score this thing dimension by dimension using a structured matrix based on actual data. No guessing, zero emotions. Just 6 rigorous rounds to see where your hard-earned money really belongs. Okay, round 1 kicks off with entry capital, and wow, this introduces our first massive divide. If you want to get into the physical property game, 100 grand barely even gets your foot in the door. It demands this huge 6-figure down payment, and actually, that's before you even calculate the brutal stamp duties you have to pay up front. Meanwhile, a REIT lets you co-own absolute trophy assets. Think grade A office towers, massive logistics hubs, and you can start with like $100. The entry barrier is basically non-existent. So round 1, that is a clean win for the REIT on pure accessibility.
Moving on to round 2, and this brings in a massive differentiator, liquidity. Say you suddenly decide to cash out. If you own a physical condo, buckle up because you're in for a really long ride. It literally takes months to find a buyer, negotiate, get through the paperwork, and no, don't forget the hefty agent commission you've got to cough up. But with REITs and stocks, you just tap a button on your screen. The trade executes in seconds, and your cash settles in exactly 2 days. The industry calls it T+2. You are definitely not locking your wealth behind a brick wall here. Round 3 tackles effort. Now, being a direct property landlord sounds amazing, right up until midnight rolls around and a pipe bursts. Physical property means dealing with tenants, fixing tops, unclogging toilets. You basically become a 24/7 maintenance hotline. With a REIT, you just hand all of that physical headache over to a professional property manager. You collect the rent, sure, but you have absolutely zero landlord duties. So 3 rounds down, and we're seeing 3 very distinct wins for the REIT on capital, liquidity, and effort.
All right, so while those first 3 rounds covered accessibility and convenience, we really need to dig a bit deeper now. We're expanding our matrix to bring in the more subtle, advanced metrics: leverage, volatility, and tax. Honestly, this is where we separate the amateurs from the pros. These are the dimensions that dictate how much risk you're actually taking on, and more importantly, how much of your profit you actually get to keep. Let's look really closely at leverage. A 50% limit is highly significant here. In Singapore, S-REITs carry a statutory gearing cap of roughly 50%. Think of this as a strict legal speed limit on borrowing. A REIT legally cannot leverage itself into oblivion, the way some speculative developer might. Compare that to a private landlord who might take on this super aggressive, maxed-out mortgage just to fund their condo. When interest rates inevitably spike, that private landlord feels immense pain. But the REIT, bounded by this 50% cap, it's structurally forced to play it safer. Next up in the matrix is volatility. Now, because REITs are traded on the stock exchange, they're priced by the market every single day. So yeah, they're going to swing more than an illiquid condo. But keep in mind, a condo's price only feels stable because it's only appraised once a year. It's totally an illusion of stability. On the flip side, compare REITs to high-growth stocks. Stocks can shake violently over a single random news headline. REITs, though, because they're backed by physical, income-producing buildings with long-term leases, they tend to just wobble gently rather than crash violently. And that brings us to our final matrix round, tax. This is huge. For a REIT to qualify for its special tax status, it has to operate under a 90% payout rule. It literally must distribute at least 90% of its taxable income back to investors. And because it does this, it gets a tax bypass, making it totally tax transparent. That gross rental income flows directly into your pocket in Singapore, essentially tax-free. Meanwhile, if you own a rental condo, you're left scrambling for deductions and interest offsets just to manage your tax bill. So the scoreboard tilts heavily toward the REIT once again.
Okay, let's get into the ultimate scorecard formula that completely settles this entire argument. This is the exact equation the professionals use. Total return equals distribution yield plus capital growth. Listen, you should never, ever judge a REIT by its yield alone. A fat dividend yield combined with a falling unit price, that is a total return trap that will just destroy your wealth. You really need the dual engines working together, the rent coming in today, plus the value of the properties growing tomorrow. So let's look at the hard data behind that formula. Historically, if you zoom out over 25 and 50-year horizons, REITs have frequently matched or even beaten both broad equity markets and residential property. Looking specifically at the FTSE ST REIT index in Singapore, its 10-year annualized total return sits at roughly 6%. That is a seriously powerful number, and the steady return is fueled by things like triple net leases and built-in annual rent escalations. Basically, every year, the rent inches up, which constantly pushes that total return higher. Let's actually translate that 6% into real money for our three friends from earlier. Remember the friend who chose REITs with their initial $100,000? At a 6% compounded annual growth rate, that initial $100,000 transforms into roughly $179,000 over a 10-year period. And honestly, the best part? They didn't even have to wait a full decade to see a return. They were collecting steady quarterly income cash flows for that entire ride. So the crucial takeaway here is really understanding what type of vehicle you're strapping yourself into. Physical property is a lot like driving a fully loaded, heavy truck. It's incredibly powerful, for sure, but try making a sudden U-turn when the market shifts. You just can't. Stocks, they're the sports bike. Thrilling, incredibly quick, but man, you are one pothole away from a complete disaster. But REITs are the hybrid sedan. They give you the steady handling and the underlying safety of real physical assets, but you still get the nimbleness and speed of stock market liquidity. It's just a superior, more balanced ride for the everyday investor. Let's run a quick, sudden stress test here. I want you to think about this actively. Say life throws you a massive, unexpected curveball, a medical emergency, a sudden move, maybe an urgent business opportunity. You need your initial $100,000 back, and you need it within a week. Think about our three assets, the condo, the stocks, the REITs. Which one of these completely fails you in this exact moment? Yeah, the condo fails. Physical property will absolutely trap your money right when you need it the most. If you're forced into a rush sale just to hit that 1-week deadline, you're going to have to sell at a severe, punishing discount. Meanwhile, the REITs and the stocks, they convert back to cash in just 2 days. Liquidity is not one of those exciting metrics people brag about at dinner parties. Until the exact day, it is literally the only thing that matters. Think of liquidity as the insurance policy you completely forgot you had. So, looking across our fully completed 6-dimension board, the REITs column clearly stands victorious. You came into this explainer wondering which of the 3 paths makes the smartest 10-year call. Well, now you don't just have an opinion. You've got the hard data, the 6% track record, and a structured framework. You can confidently defend a REIT allocation using undeniable facts across capital, liquidity, effort, leverage, volatility, and tax, rather than just guessing based on vibes. Okay, let's talk about what comes next. Our matrix proves that REITs absolutely deserve a seat at your wealth-building table. But knowing that you should buy REITs is very different from knowing exactly which ones to pick. Our next explainer is going to take you through a master's checklist heavily inspired by Ralph Bloch's core thesis on total return. We're going to look at exactly how to separate the flawless gems from the dangerous value traps. But before we go, I want to leave you with this thought. If a REIT gives you the returns of a property without plunging toilets, the liquidity of a stock without the wild panic, and a totally tax-free yield, why exactly is a massive chunk of your net worth still trapped behind a brick wall? Think about it. See you in the next explainer.